Hey everyone, it's Deb again. Thanks for joining me. And today we're going to do some things on the floor, but then we're going to also be at the chair at the end. So go ahead and have a seat on the floor. And what we're going to do first is we're just going to open the shoulders by pulling our shoulders back, putting our hands on the floor, kind of tilting that head up just a little bit. And you're going to notice what's tight, what's not. Hold that. Work on your breathing. And for some of you, if that feels like it's too much on your wrists, go to your fists. And you can still bring your shoulders back, which may be a little bit more of a challenge in the fist position, but that's okay. Just pull those shoulders down and back, away from the ears. Tilt that head a little bit. Let things stretch. And you can even go to frog position here. That opens up those hips a little bit more. As long as you're even, you can look down, so adjust your feet as necessary. Make sure heels are touching, toes are touching, and you're centered, all right? And you're just opening up those shoulders. All right, and then after we kind of open everything up, we're going to lie down on our back. Now, if your back bothers you, you can grab a leg or both legs. I don't want you to grab here, I want you to grab underneath and roll yourself down versus plopping down or struggling getting down. If that helps you to grab a leg, that's perfectly fine. So we're going to roll down on the back and we're going to straighten out our legs, all right? Your feet should be in line with your knees, your hips, and your shoulders, not out here somewhere or collapsed at midline. So you want to be even. One of the things that I do a lot of times with clients, just for awareness purposes, and most people are not very body aware, but you need to be because you can't change what you're not aware of, is what do I notice with my hips? Do I feel like there's more weight on one side? Do I feel like something touches over here that's not touching over here? And kind of assess what you're feeling. Same thing with the torso and the shoulders. Do I feel like one shoulder touches but the other one doesn't? Is it in a different spot? So after you do that assessment, what I want you to do, we've done hip to heel. For those of you who know what hip to heel is, now we're going to do that in a long lever. In other words, I'm from the hip to the foot, I'm sliding my hips forward or away from my torso. And if it's tighter on one side, you need to hold that. Whether it's front of the hip, and it's not going to be the same for everybody. If one person is rotated counterclockwise and somebody else is rotated counterclockwise, or somebody else is in posterior tilt or a combination of things, you're not going to feel it in the same spots. So allow, especially where you feel it tight, to just let go. The hips have to stay flat. The knees need to stay straight, not locked, but the knees shouldn't be bent. And again, I want that foot in line with my hip. I'm just going to slide. And part of what I want here is that feeling of, again, a smooth transition. That's always part of what our goal is, that the transition of movement is very fluid, as it should be. All right? So I'm just going to slide. So basically I'm doing hip to heel and long lever. Same muscles, but now my physics are different. The leverage is different because my knees aren't bent. And now I'm working as it should, everything from the hip to the foot, working in the same direction. The toes are facing forward. And maybe if I put my hands here, for some of you, that may help you to know what my hips are doing. And again, they're staying flat to the floor. In terms of how long you should do this, again, you'll know that when your body says, you know what, this feels pretty fluid. I feel like the transition is easy, the tightness is pretty much gone or it's diminished. And you always want to try and diminish that tightness because whatever you do next, it will make it that much more effective. All right? So once you do that, What I want you to do next is I want you to go ahead and go to supine bent knee, all right? Again, you're gonna make sure your knees are even, and we're gonna pull our feet together. And we're just gonna do some slow rocking. Challenge, don't force, let it drop. And right now, we're gonna keep our arms and our head facing, arms open and head facing straight up. Notice what's tight, come back to midline. Now, one of the things I can tell you without question is people who, when they do that, they say that hurts my hips is because you're not using your hips. If you're using your inner thighs and not using your hips, a lot of times it will give you discomfort in the hips. As you bring the legs back, you should be using the muscles underneath the glute. Those muscle fibers run this way. So if you shorten the ones on the right, those legs and hips should go to the right and vice versa. And I've had a lot of people that didn't realize they weren't using your hips. That's another reason it's probably difficult to roll over in bed, all right? So arms are out, palms are open, knees are together, and we're gonna rock. We're gonna keep the torso still. Notice if one side's tighter than the other. A lot of you are locked up right through here. One hip's higher than the other, this will help tremendously. That quadratus that we've worked on a lot in various ways, that's important in your gait. It allows that hip to move forward. You may feel it there, that's perfectly fine. Some of you will feel it on the front of the hip. Again, there's no right or wrong. Just use this to balance out, especially if there's tightness on one side. Keep doing this until the tightness is diminished. So you're going to drop using the hips, not the legs. In this case to the left, and you may notice that yes, there's more range of motion. That's always a goal. Remember, your range of motion is directly related to your functional ability. You're going to hold that. Again, you should feel like that's diminished. You're going to do that as many times as you need to until that diminishes, and then we're going to separate those feet a little bit. Every time we change the foot position, it changes what muscles get more stretch or get more activated, all right? So now that we're in neutral and we go sideways, this hip is going to be more open. So you may feel it more in the front of the hip, you may feel it more in the top of the quad, the tensor, and sometimes even in serratus. If you want to maximize that, you raise those arms a little higher. Those of you who have a shoulders forward, head forward, torso is bent over, you'll feel it here. Because what you're doing is you're opening those muscles that get tight when you bend over. This is a good position to work on your breathing as well. Because now the torso, the rib cage, all of that is tilted back, which allows everything to open more freely. And then again, using the hip, we're going to come back and we're going to go to the other side. And now, some of you, especially those of you, probably more males than females who tend to be out here, are going to feel it on the inner thigh because gravity is literally making those muscles pull that, in this case, the right leg down. Some of you, again, are going to feel it more on the front of the hip. There's not a right or a wrong. And you're going to hold that. Again, you're going to do that as many times as you need to. I would say at least 2 or 3 on each side. And then we're going to separate those feet again. Now with this one, you want to see your heels. So look down, make sure you can see your heels, because some of you are going to think, well, I'm wider than my hips. But I want you to be able to see your heels. Again, this changes a lot of things. All right? You want to make sure that you see that heel equidistant on both sides. So arms are out, palms are open. Using the hips, we're going to drop. This is part of that hip opening sequence. And what you're going to notice is now my hips are even more open than they were the first 2 times. So if you have tight hip flexors, and you guys, this is one you can do in bed, so there's no excuse. If I don't want to get on the floor, I mean, I do this one in bed. Not that I don't want to get on the floor, because I do, but I do this one in bed sometimes. And just allow those things to open. Now, some of you may feel this on your knee. That's not a red flag. That just says there's some tightness on one side or the other. That's pulling. And what you'll notice too is the more you do, the easier it gets and the less tension you've got. Again, using the hips, we're going to come back to that neutral spot. Try not to move your feet. And now we're going to go to the other side. We're going to open those hips. And again, if you want to maximize that, slide those arms up a little bit. That's going to be a challenge by itself for a lot of you. And you're going to hold that. Once you've gotten to the point where that's easy, all right, what we're going to do after you feel like pretty much the tension has got there, we're going to drop into that same position we did the third time with the heels wide. And now you're going to go to what's called hip extension. You're going to push that hip forward. That by itself will be a challenge for a lot of you because your backside is so weak. Just work on that. You're going to push that hip forward and you're going to feel all of this tightness open up, let go, probably all the way from your knee to your hip. And again, you're just going to hold that. And again, this is one that you can adjust. If it's uncomfortable, just adjust your angle. Don't extend quite so much or back off a little bit. But let things stretch. And again, challenge, don't force. Let all of those muscles stretch out. And then we're going to do the other side. Again, keep your feet, try not to move your feet. And then we're going to drop to the other side. And again, do that as many times as you need to. What I'm finding is this is something that people feel a lot of comfort in, and they want to stay in those positions. That's perfectly fine. They want to do it a few more repetitions, stay a little longer, because it's very comfortable, because it opens up so many things in the hips. That's why I call it hip opening sequence. So this is part of that. And we're going to add that hip extension. And ideally, as you go to that hip extension, you're not really feeling any tension or any tightness anywhere. That's really your goal. All right, we're going to come back using the hips. Now we're going to straighten those legs again. I want you to assess one more time what's different. And most of you are going to say, you know what, there's more balance in my hips. I feel more contact with the floor. And you should, all right? And now what we're going to do again is we're going to do that hip to heel in long lever. Now you should feel like there's a lot more range of motion and a lot more fluidity than what you had a few minutes ago. You're just sliding from the hip to the foot. You can go to dorsiflexion, and if you do, some of you will feel that on Achilles, soleus, and calf, and that's perfectly fine. Hold it if you need to, but again, the goal is that fluidity, that range of motion is what I've got in my hips. All right, so I'm going to sit up and I'm going to work on those shoulders a little bit. All right, so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go to long lever, or long sitting, and we've done torso rotation in sitting. We've never done it on the floor before, but that's what we're going to do. This time, I'm going to put this hand, in this case my left, behind me, and if you notice, as I turn, I'm going to open up this shoulder. Again, if it's hard for you to put down the hand that bothers your wrist, go to your fist. Put it behind you and open up the shoulder. Let that stretch. That's important for a lot of you. I've got this right hand in this case on this hand, but I'm not letting the shoulder roll forward. I'm still pulling that back. So in other words, I'm trying to open up the top of that chest as much as I possibly can. And I'll let that stretch. I'm going to turn my head over my left shoulder in this case as best I can. And if there's any tightness through here, you'll probably feel it because you've got the shoulder back and you've got connections that go from here to here. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to do the other direction. I'm going to put this hand left on the outside of the right, put my right hand behind me, open both shoulders, turn my head over my right shoulder, and let things stretch. And I would suggest you do that twice on each side. And then we're going to do a little bit of side reach and sitting. Again, something we've not done before. So just put your hand down, reach up and over, again if you need to, and if you feel like you can really stretch, go on that forearm. Now you'll really feel it. This arm needs to be straight. A lot of you will want to be here. Straighten that arm as best you can. Reach, reach, reach. Most of you especially will feel it through here, which is part of that muscle that's keeping that rib cage from opening up, which is the serratus. It's attached to the lateral border of your shoulder blade. And you're just going to hold that. Try not to let your feet flop out. Try to keep them facing up. And then we're going to go to the other side. And again, then this will probably give you, a lot of you, a little bit more comfort level in terms of putting your forearm down instead of your hand, but it's also going to give you a lot more stretch. And you're going to reach. And look what we're also doing. Working on load bearing in the shoulders, which is important. Being able to bear the load. That's going to be a challenge for a lot of you. And if it's a challenge, I suggest you kind of time yourself, count, whatever, so that you know where you are. Some of you are going to feel this right through here as well as down in the torso. Again, that's perfectly fine. There's no right or wrong. It's going to depend on what your dysfunctional patterns are. And remember, guys, the #1 cause of pain globally is musculoskeletal imbalance, which means your muscles are out of balance. So a pill or an injection or pills, surgery, a lot of that's not going to fix anything. In some cases it will, but a lot of it will not. That's why people say they have to have another knee replacement or another hip replacement, because you didn't really address the problem. So we're going to do that a couple of times on each side. And you should definitely feel like you've got more range in the hips and the torso. And what I did is prepare you for the last one we're going to do, called counter stretch. Any of you that have been in class with me have done this before. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to get up and you're going to find a chair, a counter, a wall. You can do this with a number of things. And so what we're going to do, and I'm going to turn this chair this way. I suggest that you start with your hands higher, and you need for them to be here as best you can. Separate them if you have to, but you want the arms to be straight. You don't want them to bend, and you want to make sure you've got arms equidistant from midline, all right? So in this case, then I'm going to put my hands on the chair, so it'll be a little lower than most of you probably will be. You can put it on a counter, a wall, a chair, whatever you need to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to step back so that my feet are behind me. And if you'll notice, my feet are facing forward, all right? And I've got that distance, basically room for a yoga block, wide side down, short end here, long end here. In other words, my feet are underneath my hips. So my feet are going to be behind me. And I've got my hands on the chair or the counter or the wall. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to hip extension. I'm going to stick my rear out as much as I can, engage my paraspinals, and I'm going to flatten my back. Now, this by itself will be a challenge for the vast majority of you. A lot of you are going to look like this because that's where you are. Your goal is to be able to flatten the back, stick your butt out, go to what's called hip extension. In other words, you don't have a round, it's not round here, there's a curve here. That's your goal. That curve belongs there. A lot of you are going to feel a lot of stretch in your hamstrings. Good, you need to. Again, the other thing about this one is you can change the physics. If it's too intense, back it off. All right, so but drop it down. Now, if you notice, my hips are pretty much over my feet. That's why in the beginning, I moved my feet back away from my torso in the chair. And I just hold that. Make sure you're breathing, allow all this to stretch. And once you've done that, and I would suggest that in the beginning in particular, you get out of it and get back in it, you will always notice the second and third time is easier than the first. Your movement is better, you don't have as much tension, and we're going to go back into it again. So feet are behind us. We're going to drop down, all right? So now, after I'm here, again, my back should be flat. I'm dropping my chest. I'm sticking my rear out, going to hip extension. I'm going to bend my knees a little bit. All right, so I'm going to bend my knees, and that allows me to go to more hip extension. If you notice, now with my knees bent, I can stick my butt out a little bit more. What's going to happen is you're going to feel those hamstrings in a little bit different spot. And again, shortening the lever allows you to get more hip extension. And again, you're just going to hold that. Some of you may feel this in Achilles, soleus, calf. Good. This one is a challenge for a lot of people, but it is so effective. It's such a huge multitasker in bringing balance back into those muscles and allowing things to stretch out. And then come up slowly. You're going to take a deep breath. And I would suggest that you do that one at least 3 or 4 times. Hold as long as your body allows you to, but you'll notice a big difference. Thanks again for joining me, and we'll see you next time.